It is Tuesday, May 3rd. Welcome to the NFL Mocks podcast here on NFLMocks.com, the Twitterverse, wherever you may be listening. We appreciate it greatly. Guys, the draft just ended. It ended. Like all the work we put in, 362 days since the last draft, and it's over already. How does that happen? It always baffles me. We do all this work and it's over, but two of the guys that do some of the best work in the draft community that nobody ever seems to talk about, they're my sleepers in the NFL draft breakdown community. That is George Stockberger and Sarah Bedinger, both of NFLMocks.com. George, I'm going to go to you first. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good.
Are you sad that the draft's over? Because I am.
Yeah, I mean, especially because the Eagles didn't have a lot of picks. After Wentz, the picks weren't all that exciting. So, a little boring this year on my end.
Sarah, what about you? Things weren't exactly boring for your Denver Broncos.
It never is, Joe. It never is boring. And, it was another great year. It was an interesting year because the Broncos needed a quarterback this year badly. And John Elway took one for the first time. In the first round, actually the first offensive player ever he's taken. So it was pretty crazy, man. It was a lot of fun. And it's definitely different watching the draft from the vantage point of being the Super Bowl champion. So really cool year for the draft.
Where did you guys watch the draft? George, where did you watch the draft?
I was doing draft work on the radio, so I was jumping in and out of the studio, and we have the TV in the studio, but I could hear the picks from our live feed at the draft a little bit earlier than everyone else. So, most of it was over at the studio hearing it before you guys.
Sarah, I imagine your Super Bowl 50 party was probably just still lingering, right? I mean, that's how you watched?
It was great, man. I was just in the living room of my house. The Super Bowl is a little different. You watch with a lot of people. The draft, I like to, kind of keep to myself a little bit, just kind of focus in on what's going on. And that to me is a little bit more fun than having a whole bunch of people over like the Super Bowl.
Yeah, last year I was actually taking, it was day 3, I was taking my SATs, so that was kind of a bummer. This year I was watching in a hotel room in Columbia, South Carolina with my parents just hanging out. So it was interesting. They went to bed at like 9 o'clock and I'm like, guys, it's pick 6. Like, what are you doing? But apparently they didn't care that, Corey Coleman, my favorite prospect, still wasn't taken. I thought they'd be on the edge of their seat like I was, but they weren't. So, much ado about nothing for them, but for us, we got a lot of stuff to talk about and not a lot of time to do it. So, Sarah, I want to start with you. Paxton Lynch, you're the Denver Broncos guy. Paxton Lynch, they moved up with the Seattle, was it with the Seattle Seahawks at 26 to take Paxton Lynch there. So, give me your thoughts on that because I think it's a really solid future forward-looking pick.
Yeah, going into the draft, I kind of felt like, the Broncos were going to do one of two things. Either John Elway was going to maintain the status quo and take a defensive player and get his quarterback via the 49ers and Colin Kaepernick or possibly even, Sam Bradford. But I figured it was either a defensive player and trade for a quarterback or draft a quarterback in the first round and go the homegrown route. And honestly, it could have been Paxton Lynch. It could have even been Connor Cook. I mean, I hate to even say that because now he's a Raiders player, but whoever the Broncos had taken in the first round at the quarterback position, I knew that it was going to be an exciting deal. And honestly, I didn't think that Paxton Lynch was going to be available. I had picked the 49ers to actually trade back into earlier in the first round to get him. So I didn't think he'd be available. I thought the Broncos would get outbid, but John Elway waited and bided his time and got a steal. I think I'm really, really pleased with Paxton Lynch being our quarterback of the future.
Yeah, and we'll have plenty of time this offseason to talk about the Broncos and what they're going to try to do to repeat from last year. And obviously the quarterback situation going to be intriguing as well. Another quarterback situation, George, that you're familiar with, Christian Hackenberg, the Penn State guy. I'm going to be honest, went a little earlier than I thought he would. Pick number 20 in the second round to the New York Jets. Just give me your general analysis on that and try not to be the Penn State homer that I respect that you are, but I know that you loved Hack. So just give me your take on the Jets taking Hackenberg.
Yeah, honestly, that's where I thought he was kind of going to fall. I was looking at Buffalo and the Jets as the two teams that were going to look at him. I thought it was going to be Buffalo because their owners are Penn State alumni and their name is on our hockey arena. So I figured when their second round pick came up, it was going to be them. Everyone at the studio was kind of watching the TV really closely, and it was someone else, and we were all really surprised. And then a couple picks later, the Jets jump up, the Texans jump up, and we think, did Bill O'Brien just trade up for Hackenberg? He didn't, and kept on going. And finally, the Jets took him, which when I was at the pro day, Chan Gailey was there, and the Jets had the most scouts and coaches out of any team that I saw. So it was clear that the Jets liked him. I thought it was a good spot to take him because a lot of people said he probably has the highest upside out of when you look at guys like Goff, Wentz, and Lynch. So I ended the second round. I thought that was a pretty good fit there.
Absolutely. Obviously a rapid fire show, so I'm going to yield to you guys for a lot of this stuff, and we'll jump topic to topic. And I don't want to touch on the main topics, quote unquote main topics like the Laramie Tunsil slide. You'll hear enough of that on ESPN. I want to get down to the nitty gritty of this stuff. And going back to the first round, guys, the wide receiver run pretty much happened when we thought it would. You had Corey Coleman going a little earlier to the Browns, who traded up for him, traded back, and got Corey Coleman. But 21, 22, 23, you had the Texans, Redskins, and Vikings all taking their receivers. Houston went with Will Fuller from Notre Dame. The Redskins got Josh Doxson. And surprisingly, the Vikings were still able to snatch Laquan Treadwell, guys. Try saying that 5 times fast. With the number 23 overall pick. So I'm curious, and I'll start with you, Sarah. Of these 3 guys, Fuller to the Texans, Doxson to the Redskins, and Treadwell to the Vikings, what do you think has the best outlook short-term for the future?
Oh, I think you have to look at the player that has the best quarterback throwing him the ball, and I think that's definitely Josh Doxson in Washington. Will Fuller is going to be working with Brock Osweiler, who has 7 career starts, and Laquan Treadwell is going to be working with Teddy Bridgewater, who can get him he can get him the ball in the short intermediate game, which is where he's good. But I think Doxson's going to have a great time working with Kirk Cousins out in Washington and becoming that number 1 receiver, which they don't technically have a go-to guy. I mean, they have a lot of guys who can make plays, but they don't have that go-to number 1 receiver like a Josh Doxson, who I thought was a lot like Odell Beckham Jr. I know George likens him to AJ Green. So I think Josh Doxson is going to be a heck of a pro and a great situation there with the Washington Redskins.
And George, Sarah mentions the quarterback aspect of this and future success. Obviously, it plays a big part of it. But as far as these 3 guys, who do you think has the most raw talent heading into the first year of the NFL?
I'm not sure. I could tell Sarah was a little salty with Brock Osweiler there.
No,
maybe the Denver Broncos. But when you look at those guys, I like Will Fuller, but I thought he was more of a second-round pick because of the body catches and the drops. Again, like Sarah said, I really like Josh Doxson. And with Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon, another year older, and in the last year of their contracts, I think Doxson has the best potential, especially Kirk Cousins, keeps doing what he's doing and develops. So, and Treadwell, people talk about his speed. He's a guy who can pretty much catch almost anything thrown to him. So if Teddy Bridgewater has the opportunity to, not get run over by a couple defensive linemen, Treadwell could do well. So as far as talent, I think Doxson, he was the number 1 on my board, but I think Treadwell is going to do just as well.
I tell you what, when you look at Corey Coleman going 15, I know I didn't really give you guys that option because maybe I just wanted to hog the time and talk about him. But Corey Coleman, the guy I really loved coming out of Baylor, I thought he's a real playmaker. And I know he doesn't have maybe the most well-rounded game in this class, but he's got that quick start. He really can get by defenders. And when you look at what the Browns did, they drafted Coleman in the first round. They took Ricardo Lewis, the receiver from Auburn, in the 4th, Jordan Payton from UCLA in the 5th, Rashard Higgins from Colorado State in the 5th. These guys, they went all in on receivers this year, so I thought that was interesting. And you're building a core. We always say Cleveland had a really good draft after the fact, and it never always seems to pan out. But this year, George Carl Nassib from Penn State in the 3rd, I think that they made out really well. So I'm excited to see what the Browns can do. Sneaky good draft is our next topic. I love the word sneaky, the term sneaky good. Yeah, I'd probably use it every day. People probably around me probably get annoyed because I call like a good dish of pasta sneaky good. It's just the way I am. I don't know why. It's kind of it's stuck in my vocabulary, and it doesn't always just apply to football. So enough about my Italian restaurant choices. I want to know which team you guys thought had a really sneaky good draft. Sarah, I'll throw it to you first. Sneaky good. You got to use it at least twice, by the way. So which team had a sneaky good draft over the weekend?
I don't know what a lot of people are saying about it, but I'm going to definitely say that the Chicago Bears had a sneaky good draft and a really sneaky good pick in the second round in Cody Whitehair, who's a player that I think could have easily gone in the first round. When I scouted Cody Whitehair, I remember saying to George a couple of weeks ago, I think Cody Whitehair is the best player that I scouted. Now, I wasn't really looking at my list of prospects, and I had scouted guys like the Shaq Lawson from Clemson. I scouted some really good guys, but Cody Whitehair was a guy that when I watched him, I remember saying, this guy looks like a professional football player playing with a bunch of college kids. And that's exactly basically what he was. And I think the Bears getting him in the second round, insane value, especially having traded up in the first round to get Leonard Floyd. And then in the third round, you get Jonathan Ballard, and then you get the running back from Indiana later. Just an insane draft, sneaky good, like you said. I don't know how many people are talking about it, but that's one draft that I'd be really proud of if I was a Chicago Bears fan.
Yeah, Cody Whitehair at 56 definitely earns the sneaky good label there. I think that's great value. I thought he might even sneak into the end of the first round with the paramount importance you have on interior linemen nowadays. I think it's important to have a good guy, and Whitehair definitely fits the mold there. George, again, the challenge is out for you to stay sneaky good. I think you got an ups there now. He went twice, maybe 3 times. So which team do you think had a sneaky good draft?
Well, I think there are a couple teams. First of all, I think Baltimore did well. They did their thing. They got a couple pass rushers with Correa and Kafasi. Also got Tavon Young. And I think Kenneth Dixon, 134th overall, that was a total steal for them. So I think the Ravens had a sneaky good draft. I also like what the Bengals did. They were able to get Andrew Billings, who I projected him there to Cincinnati in the first round. So they got him 122nd overall. They got Tyler Boyd, 55th overall. So I think the Bengals had a good draft. I think there are a couple of different ones. The Colts had a good draft. They got Kelly, TJ Green, LaRaven Clark, Joe Hagg. I think there were a ton of really good teams this year.
Well, you only used the term sneaky good once. So as my good friends at Around the Horn would do, if I had a mute feature, I would mute you for 30 seconds right now. But that's okay. We're going to go to Sarah anyway. But sneaky good, I think we just found ourselves a new segment, guys. The sneaky good segment. We're going to have to find maybe a little bit better name for it. But I think the sneaky good segment, that might catch on here. A pick that I don't think was sneaky good, and let's cut that off because that's going to we're going to lose a lot of viewers quickly. Only for the sneaky good segment only. Cardale Jones going to the Bills, really didn't necessarily understand it. I know you have the situation with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, but Cardale Jones to the Bills, I like Cardale, don't get me wrong, but it seemed a little high for me for Buffalo. So, Sarah, what do you think about Cardale Jones going to Buffalo? Do you think there's any potential future fit there?
I think going into the draft, my opinion on Cardale Jones was anytime you get him on day 3 is a good time to get him because Cardale Jones has some of the best raw tools in this draft at quarterback to work with. Now, he's got a lot of work to do, and he's already going to be an older rookie. So he's got a long way to go, especially in Buffalo where, they don't have a long tenured history of developing great quarterbacks, at least in the modern football era. So having a guy like Cardale Jones in there, especially where there's kind of controversy over, is Tyrod Taylor going to get re-signed? Does Cardale Jones have a chance to play this year? I really don't like the option of him playing this year. But like I said, every raw tool that you could want in a quarterback, athleticism, moxie in big games, strong arm, he's got it. And he's bigger than any quarterback that I can remember seeing. I mean, just the thickness of that guy and the way that he runs with the football. I really like his potential if developed correctly. I just don't know if I like the fit in Buffalo, like you said.
A guy that went 36 picks before him, George, was Cody Kessler. No, my math wasn't right there. It wasn't 36. This is a draft show. This isn't a math show, so don't hold me against it. But he went significantly higher than Cardale Jones. Cody Kessler from USC went to Cleveland. Really surprising. I think this was one of the bigger surprises of the draft, just because when you look at quarterbacks being taken inside the top 100, you're expecting somewhat of a production pretty soon. And George, I'm not so sure that Cody Kessler is going to provide that for Cleveland.
Yeah, especially when you look at who was still on the board. Connor Cook was still there. And I know there were, leadership concerns and locker room concerns with him, but he at least played in the conditions you're going to face when you're playing in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, in Baltimore. Cody Kessler's playing out on the West Coast, where it's 80 and sunny every day. He's going to have to adjust to playing in the rain and playing in the snow. So I think not just the bad value of drafting him where they did, just the fact that I don't think he's going to be a fit for a team that has a lot more needs than sort of a not flashy quarterback, but just a quarterback with a name who they're not going to play.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have a run on quarterbacks, and maybe it wasn't really a run necessarily, but you did have. It's odd. Kessler to the Browns. It's interesting, and Cardale. Really, I don't see any potential quarterback coming out of this other than the top three really doing well in the next 3 to 4 years. You have Jacoby Brissett going to the Patriots at 91. That was a bit of a surprise. It's just a lot of interesting picks. Connor Cook lasted into the 4th round of the Raiders. Really interesting pick there because you do have Derek Carr. So it was a strange quarterback draft, guys, and I guess we expected that. But another position that's not necessarily strange, but there were some teams waiting on some very good prospects. That was the running back class. And you had Ezekiel Elliott go number 4 to the Cowboys. But after that, you waited until Derrick Henry got picked at 45 to the Titans. You had Kenyon Drake going surprisingly high at 73 to the Dolphins. And then you have a guy in Devontae Booker, who was one of my favorite prospects all along. Sarah, your team, the Broncos, snatched him at 136 in the 4th round. Yeah. Booker, a really good playmaker. Give me your thoughts on him because I think that's a tremendous value.
Yeah, going into day 3 of the draft, it's always interesting to see who's still basically in the thrift shop of draft prospects. When you go into day 3 of the draft, you're hoping for the best possible value at every pick and a guy that can contribute, especially early on special teams. But for the Broncos to be able to get a starting caliber running back at pick number 136 overall was insane value. Me and the rest of Broncos country were freaking out over that pick. Devontae Booker would have easily been my number 3 running back behind Ezekiel Elliott and Derrick Henry. And to get him where they did at 136, like I said, it's just ridiculous. You're talking about a guy who I watched on tape and I thought compared favorably to Arian Foster, the way that he catches the ball, the way that he's elusive and doesn't really have that blazing breakaway speed, but kind of gets to that 2nd and 3rd gear really quickly. So he's able to get by the 2nd and 3rd level of defense. So Devontae Booker was, a guy that obviously the Broncos should be really excited to add, especially having re-signed CJ Anderson and Ronnie Hillman this offseason. They've got a nice stable of backs. They drafted a fullback as well to reestablish that great classic zone running scheme in Denver.
One team, guys, I have to say I didn't love what they did this year was Tennessee. They traded up for Jack Conklin at 8, a risk, absolutely. Kevin Dodd they got at 33, a decent pick. I just didn't love the overall, what they put together with this draft class. But a pick that intrigued me was Derrick Henry at 45 because I really thought that Henry would maybe go a little bit earlier. Really good prospect for a team that's going to succeed and turn heads this year. Obviously, now Marcus Mariota has his running back in Derrick Henry. Clearly, obviously, we know he's not the only running back on that roster. So, George, give me some analysis on Henry at 45 and the Titans as a whole.
Yeah, I can't think of a year or a situation where one team got back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners, with Mariota and Derrick Henry. So, and plus they just traded for DeMarco Murray. Now, they didn't give up a lot. They only traded up, or I should say traded down a couple picks in the 4th round. But, yeah, it was a really surprising pick to me that they went there. I just want to throw in the Eagles took Wendell Smallwood out of West Virginia, about 18 picks before Alex Collins, and I did not like that at all. Alex Collins was a guy coming out of Arkansas who I loved since day one. He reminds me of Marshawn Lynch. And, they took Wendell Smallwood, who has had, not major off-the-field issues, but pretty large ones. And, Collins went to the Seahawks, who had already taken C.J. Prosise. So, again, I don't understand Seahawks taking Prosise and Collins. But, again, the Eagles taking Smallwood, I don't understand that either.
You bring up an interesting point there within the off-field issues. And, Sarah, I want to go to you on this real quick. How much do you think teams should be factoring in these off-field issues? Because, obviously, you're dealing with suspensions, but they're more than suspensions. Now they're multi-million-dollar decisions being made on draft day when you have a guy who has had clear off-the-field issues and is potentially going to miss games for your team, costing you money, costing you a roster spot. It's interesting because I feel as though teams are taking this more into consideration. We saw with the Laramie Tunsil slide. We saw with Robert Kondichi, one of the best prospects in this class, lasted until 30 to Arizona. How important do you think teams are taking it, and how do you think they're factoring these picks in, especially in the first, second, third rounds of the draft?
I think that the league kind of made its case for that over the weekend. You saw, like you said, I mean, starting with Tunsil basically at the top of the draft, and then Nkemdiche, and then you look at guys like Leonte Carroo, and then I was shocked to see Tyler Higbee out of Western Kentucky drafted. I mean, that was a guy that just recently had something come up. I mean, in a serious, I think it was he got into a fight outside of a bar or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I mean, you're talking about NFL teams basically just saying, you know what, we'll deal with this later, if it even comes up in the league circles. So I think that, NFL teams have kind of proven their tendency over the course of the years is just to say, you know what, we'll take a guy if he's talented, and if he gets in trouble, we'll just bite that bullet. But our job is to win games, and we need the most talented players available. So that's why guys like Tunsil go to 13 to Miami when, Miami didn't necessarily have the biggest need for a left tackle, or Nkemdiche to the Cardinals was just a great value for them in terms of the player and his, projection to the next level. But again, they've had experience with those guys in the past. Look at Tyrann Mathieu in Arizona, turned his life around. And I don't know how early that was before he got to Arizona, but that guy came into the NFL with some big red flags character-wise, and he's turned into one of the coolest players in the league and a guy that people respect. So you just never know what NFL teams feel like their culture and their locker room can do for a guy, but clearly they're not taking into account at least a lot this year, what guys are doing off the field.
Yeah, certainly fascinating, intriguing to watch moving forward. I think you do have teams, like you said, placing a paramount on these things. And me and George talked about it in our last podcast when you're talking about the multi-million-dollar decisions and the injuries and the impact that team doctors are now having on decisions. We saw with Miles Jack, Jalen Smith. It's a neat storyline, and it just throws the draft into a whole nother spectrum and just takes it to a whole nother level that it's already, like you said, I think Sarah used the word insane earlier. It's insane. I mean, it's awesome. And it's what makes the draft so much fun. There's no segue to what we're about to go into with off the field stuff, but I'm just going to say it, guys. We live in a world where a kicker gets taken number 59. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers moved up to get Roberto Aguayo from Florida State, the kicker. And as my good friend Rich Eisen, he's not my good friend Rich Eisen, I'm a fan of Rich Eisen. He says, punters are people too. It applies to kickers. And George, Roberto Aguayo going to the Buccaneers at 59. I loved it, dude. I was going crazy because I think it's I don't know, it's fun. A kicker, guys. A kicker went 59. I mean, what was your reaction when you saw that?
I mean, it was funny, but I mean, it was funny in a sad way because they traded up and they gave up, a third and a fourth round pick for him. I think he would have been there at least at the fourth round pick. So, and when you look at Tampa Bay, they still have a bunch of needs, despite getting their quarterback last year. They got Hargraves, they got Noah Spence. Those were two pretty good picks. But after that, they didn't really have a great draft. So, and most of that is because, again, they gave up their third and fourth round picks. So, again, I thought it was funny, more from a why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense standpoint. But I don't know. Again, it doesn't make any sense to me to trade that much for a kicker.
My belief in the draft was that they would get kicked out of my fantasy league if they were pulling those kind of tricks in the drafts. And dude, I mean, we do live in a world where kickers get picked in the second round, but look back at where Sebastian Janikowski got drafted. I mean, the Raiders and the Buccaneers, I don't know what's going on over the decades in those front offices, but first and second round picks on kickers, I don't understand it. I don't get it. There's a reason
they're the Bucs and the Raiders, because they take kickers on day 1 and 2.
Interesting, guys, though. A punter got taken in the 4th, and a long snapper got taken in the 6th. We got some specialists in there. And, Sarah, if I'm not mistaken, your Broncos took a punter. Is that correct?
They did, and I looked up some of his highlights, and what's interesting is the first thing that pops up when you search – his name is Riley Dixon from Syracuse. The first thing that pops up is like this 3-minute highlight reel of all of his fake punts and fake field goals and extra points and all these things that he did at Syracuse. So it's kind of cool to see the Broncos get a guy who can kick the ball. I think he had a record 75-yard punt at Syracuse, but also a guy that can just flat out ball. I mean, he threw the ball, he threw a touchdown pass, he ran for touchdown. I mean, it's pretty crazy to see what these guys are capable of doing, but that's the right spot to do it in the 7th round. If you prioritize a guy and you don't want him to sign with another team in free agency, use your 7th round pick on a guy. But yeah, I don't know, 4th and 6th round. I mean, it's just crazy.
It sounds like the description I just heard from you is Riley Dixon the next Tim Tebow?
It sounds like, he can do all the same things.
It's going to be a phenomenon. It's going to be Riley Dixon T-shirts. I'm telling you, the jerseys are going to be flying. I can see it now. I think you should get one, Sarah.
Yeah, people are going to be Dixoning on the field.
Yeah. What does that
that's going to look like? I don't know.
That's what I'm curious. What does a punt
Yeah. It might just look like, you're trying to kick yourself in the face or something crazy, like a big leg lift pose or something like that. I don't know. Could be something pretty cool, but we'll find out.
Here at NFL Mocks, we have some experience with people kicking each other in the face. That's a good inside joke for another day. But guys, we have about 3 minutes left. We actually had more time than I thought we would. So I want to go rapid fire real quick. George, I'm going to give you a quarterback's name. Tell me how many years it's going to be for him to start in the NFL. I know this is throwing you guys off guard. So I'm going to give you a name. Tell me how long it will take for him to be a starting quarterback in the NFL and if it'll be with the team he's currently on. So we talked about Jacoby Brissett. How long will it take for him to start, and will he still be on the Patriots?
To be a consistent starter, I'll say 6 years with the Patriots.
Sarah, I'll throw it to you. Dak Prescott with the Cowboys.
I think he could start this year at some point.
Interesting. I agree with you there. Brandon Allen, Arkansas, got picked in the 6th round to the Jaguars. This is a wild card. I'm going to you, George.
I don't think he'll ever be a consistent starter, so I'll say never.
Sarah, I'm going to give you your rival, Connor Cook with the Raiders.
Not anytime soon. He'll pull a Kirk Cousins, and someday, hopefully, he'll get picked up by another team. I don't know who, but I could see him starting in the next 4 years for somebody else.
George, Kevin Hogan was a surprise, got taken with the Chiefs in the 5th round, 162 overall. When is it going to be Kevin Hogan, a starting quarterback in the NFL?
I'll say 2 or 3 years, because I think he'll be a decent option to work under Andy Reid, and eventually Alex Smith is going to completely fall apart again.
Sarah, I know we gave George this name earlier, but I'm going to give it to you to get your take. Christian Hackenberg with the Jets.
Christian Hackenberg could start. He could start this year. I mean, that situation in New York is desperate. Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't want to play at the price they're trying to pay, which is why they drafted Hackenberg. And so I see that as a very wide open competition. Geno Smith is not good. Bryce Petty is unproven, as is Hackenberg. So I say give him a shot this year.
Stockburger, I'm going to give you a not so fair question. Who has the better NFL career, Christian Hackenberg or Tim Tebow?
Oh, that's not even a, I don't even know. It's going to be Hackenberg by far. I mean.
Well, George, you know that Hackenberg has to win a playoff game and win a division.
Exactly.
So that's the bar that's set there.
Well, I mean, I think Buffalo are starting to have a decent defense at this point. He's going to be able to throw to guys like, Sammy Watkins, or not Sammy Watkins, thinking Buffalo. He's got Brandon Marshall. He's got Eric Decker. That's more talent than he ever had, on the fingertips of James Franklin's offense at Penn State. So, it's not even fair. It's going to be Hackenberg. But I just want to jump in real quick, and I want to rant about the Detroit Lions taking a long snapper. And you look at what happened to the Lions this year. They lost Calvin Johnson. They went out and they spent way too much money on Marvin Jones. So when you look at the draft, they take a long snapper, 210th overall. You look 1, 2, 3 picks later, Aaron Burbridge gets drafted. Guess what? The Lions didn't draft one wide receiver. You look 230 overall. Daniel Braverman goes to the Bears. I don't know what they're thinking over there in Detroit, but they could have gotten 2 good wide receivers. But no, they took a long snapper. Who could be your starting center anyway?
George, that was not exactly a Stephen A. Smith or a Skip Bayless level ranting, but it was good. We'll work on that.
I think I wanted to keep it a little.
We'll have George's weekly rant. I think that's what we're going to go with. But guys, we're out of time. It was a lot of fun. We'll do it again soon. So Sarah, I'll start with you. Tell everybody where they can find you on the Twitterverse and all that good stuff.
You can find me on Twitter at Sarah Bettinger, and because probably none of you know how to spell that, it's SayreBedinger. You can also find me on other social media platforms with the same handle. So,
yep, check Sarah out on Snapchat, right? You have a Snapchat?
Oh yeah, I just got one.
Oh, you did? See,
no, I didn't. No, that's a lie.
Oh man, now I'm bummed. But anyway, George, just try to whatever. Say what you got. I'm bummed now. George, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at draftstock_1. You also find me on the NFL Mocks Twitter page at NFL Mocks. You can find me on my new NFL Mocks Instagram page at NFL Mocks1. And you can find me on Snapchat, but I'm not going to give that out.
You can find me on Snapchat and on Twitter and on Instagram at Joe Wedra. Don't Snapchat me. I will not accept your friend request. That is borderline creepy. On Facebook, if people still use Facebook, I'm on there, all that good stuff. Be sure to check out NFLMocks.com for your best NFL draft coverage. This has been another edition of the NFL Mocks podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Have a good one.